All right, so let's take a look at the second argument. This argument is against harvesting baby Teresa's organs before her biological death. And this argument, Rachel calls the argument that we should not use people as means. And as with our first argument, this argument has a premise. It starts out by articulating a principle, a moral norm. And that moral norm is that it's wrong to violate a person's autonomy. So what is it that Rachel is talking about when he's talking about autonomy? Well, we get a hint on page 4 when he talks about what it is that he thinks allows us to perform that operation, that why this isn't a good argument. And so he says, taking baby Teresa's organs, however, could not thwart her autonomy because she has no autonomy. She cannot make decisions, she has no desires, and she cannot value anything. Okay? So the idea behind autonomy is essentially the idea of agency. It's having experiences, it's having desires, it's having values, being able to make decisions and control your own actions. And he wants to argue that baby Teresa has none of these properties, and hence she doesn't have autonomy. But the argument itself says it's wrong to violate a person's autonomy as a general principle. Using Teresa for her organs would violate her autonomy. It would be doing something that was contrary to her desires, her values, her interests, and hence would cause her harm. And it concludes, therefore, that we ought not transplant those organs. Now, as I indicated, Rachel evaluates this argument as an unsound argument. He doesn't think it's a good argument, and he thinks the argument is bad because it is an argument with at least one false premise. So he doesn't question its logical structure. Instead, he questions the truth of the premises. And he gives us this argument that I quoted earlier, that taking baby Teresa's organs, however, could not thwart her autonomy because she has no autonomy. She cannot make decisions, she has no desires, and she cannot value anything. So this, like his statement in the first argument, suggests that he considers baby Teresa, given the facts of the case, to merely be biologically alive. That is, she's not conscious, she doesn't have feelings, she doesn't have goals, desires, values, she's not autonomous in any way. Right? And as a result, if we were to harvest her organs, we wouldn't be violating those goals, desires, wouldn't be causing intrinsically bad experiences, we wouldn't be preventing her from acting in a way that she would want to act, and so on. And so Rachel then thinks that this is not a good argument against transplantation. He thinks that this argument fails, and it fails because one of its premises isn't true. The premise that states that our operation would violate her autonomy. So implicitly, he is not questioning the truth of that first premise, that general principle that says that it's wrong morally to violate a person's autonomy. Instead, he's challenging the idea that this case is a case where you have someone whose autonomy could be violated by such an action. So let's go ahead and turn now to our third argument. This argument is again an argument against performing the operation, and this argument Rachel refers to as the argument from the wrongness of killing. And with all the other arguments, this argument starts off with a principle. And this principle, in this case, is that it's always wrong to kill a person. So no matter what the circumstances, we are always morally prohibited from killing people. Second premise asserts that to use Teresa's organs, she must be killed. So it describes what it considers to be the morally relevant features of the case. The operation to transplant organs will cause Teresa's biological death. She wouldn't die at that moment unless the operation was performed. Therefore, it concludes that we ought not transplant those organs. So our second argument, the argument from the wrongness of killing, again, it has a general normative principle, ethical principle as its first premise, a description of relevant facts of the case in the second, and then it draws a conclusion in the third. Again, Rachel offers up an evaluation of it, and he suggests that this argument is also possibly unsound. And in this case, what he wants to argue is that it's not obvious that this first principle is an exceptionless principle, that it is always, without any possible exceptions, wrong to kill a person. And so he's going to, again, question the truth of the premises of this argument, but this time he's going to question whether or not the first premise, that general rule, should be interpreted as having no exceptions ever. And his reasons for that are going to be that, as he says on page 5, baby Teresa isn't conscious. She will never have a life. She's going to die soon, and taking her organs would help other babies. Right? We could add to this other features of baby Teresa's case that might enhance this. Right? So, as we noted earlier, she's not an autonomous agent. As we noted earlier, she's not conscious. She's not having experiences. We're not going to be causing her pain. And so we can bolster the reasons that Rachel gives a little bit in this case to talk about why it is that killing her isn't necessarily a violation. Now, all of these reasons that we give are reasons why it might be an exception to kill a person, that rule to kill a person, or it might be reasons to suppose that baby Teresa doesn't count as a person in the morally relevant sense. She doesn't have the sorts of qualities and features that we associate with personhood that are morally relevant, that make it bad to kill people. And so there are two ways that we can understand Rachel's objections to that first premise. One, doesn't apply to baby Teresa, and two, that in fact there are exceptions to this principle. So we'll go ahead and consider the next example case that Rachel brings up in this chapter in the next segment of this lecture.